The mahogany conference table stretched before her like an altar of ambition, its polished surface reflecting the faces of 12 board members who had gathered to witness what they believed would be Marcus Chen's greatest triumph. Dr. Sarah Chun sat in the back corner of the boardroom, her presence barely acknowledged by the men in expensive suits who filled the leather chairs around that imposing table. The October rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, creating a rhythmic backdrop to what would become the most significant presentation in Chun Dynamics' 15-year history. Marcus stood at the head of the room, his silver hair perfectly styled, his custom-tailored navy suit fitting his 6-foot frame with the precision that only money could buy. At 52, he possessed the kind of commanding presence that made venture capitalists reach for their checkbooks. His voice carried the confident tone of a man who had never been questioned, never been doubted, never been told no. Today, he would unveil his latest innovation to the board. At least, that was how he would frame it. I wonder where you're watching this story unfold from today. Whether you're at home, commuting, or taking a break from your own workplace battles, this tale of stolen dreams and hidden truths might feel familiar. Drop a comment and let me know what part of the world you're experiencing this from. Sarah's dark eyes tracked every gesture her husband made as he began his presentation. She had heard these words before, seen these slides, reviewed these algorithms. Every line of code, every breakthrough equation, every revolutionary concept that Marcus was about to claim had originated from her mind, her research, her sleepless nights spent hunched over computer screens in the basement laboratory that no one else knew existed. The quantum encryption algorithm that would revolutionize cybersecurity. Hers. The machine learning framework that could predict market fluctuations with 97% accuracy. Hers. The artificial intelligence system that could diagnose rare diseases from symptom patterns alone. Also hers. Marcus clicked to his first slide, displaying a complex flowchart that Sarah had drawn by hand 3 months earlier. She watched him gesture confidently at connections and pathways that she had discovered through months of painstaking research. The board members leaned forward, their expressions shifting from polite attention to genuine excitement as Marcus explained the commercial applications of what he called his breakthrough innovation. Board member Harrison Webb, a veteran of Silicon Valley whose gray beard and wire-rimmed glasses gave him the appearance of a tech sage, raised his hand. Marcus, that's incredible work. The potential applications are staggering. How long did it take you to develop this framework? Marcus smiled with practiced humility. It's been my passion project for the better part of 2 years. You know how it is when inspiration strikes. I'd find myself working until 3 in the morning, completely lost in the elegance of the mathematical relationships. Sarah's jaw tightened. Those 3 a.m. work sessions had indeed happened, but Marcus had been asleep in their king-sized bed while she labored over equations in the basement. She remembered those nights vividly. The taste of cold coffee, the strain in her neck from leaning over notebooks, the excitement of breakthrough moments that she had celebrated alone in the fluorescent-lit solitude of her hidden workspace. The presentation continued for another 30 minutes. Marcus fielded questions with the expertise of someone who had lived and breathed every aspect of the technology. Of course he could answer them expertly. Sarah had spent the past month preparing him, walking him through every nuance, every potential investor question, every technical challenge. She had believed they were preparing together for their company's future. She had not realized she was writing her own professional obituary. As Marcus concluded his presentation, the board erupted in applause. Sarah remained motionless, her hands folded in her lap, watching her life's work receive the recognition it deserved under someone else's name. The irony was not lost on her that she had taught Marcus everything he needed to steal her achievements. Board member Patricia Hendricks, one of only 2 women in the room besides Sarah, spoke up. This positions Chun Dynamics at the forefront of the industry. Marcus, your vision for the company's technical direction has been absolutely brilliant. Sarah bit back the words that threatened to escape her lips. Her vision, her technical direction, her brilliant innovations presented by a man who couldn't write basic code without her guidance. Marcus straightened his tie, a gesture Sarah recognized as his tell for particularly bold lies about to emerge. That brings me to an important announcement. As Chun Dynamics enters this next phase of growth, I believe it's time for some organizational changes that will allow us to maximize our potential." The room fell silent except for the rain against the windows. Sarah felt a cold certainty settling in her chest. "My wife Sarah has been instrumental in supporting the company's growth over the years," Marcus continued, his tone carrying false warmth. "However, I believe the time has come for her to step back from day-to-day operations so she can focus on what matters most. Our family, our home, the foundation that allows innovators like myself to push the boundaries of what's possible." Sarah's vision blurred for a moment as the words hit her. 15 years of partnership, 15 years of building this company together, 15 years of her innovations driving their success. And now Marcus was publicly dismissing her as if she had been nothing more than a supportive accessory to his genius. Harrison Webb nodded approvingly. "That's very thoughtful, Marcus. It takes a special kind of woman to understand that sometimes the greatest contribution is knowing when to let a visionary lead without distraction." The other board members murmured their agreement. Sarah watched these men, all of whom had benefited from her innovations, reduce her contributions to the role of dutiful wife who should be grateful for the opportunity to step aside. Not one of them questioned Marcus's narrative. Not one of them asked about her technical background, her MIT doctorate, her published research that had laid the groundwork for every major breakthrough Chin Dynamics had achieved. She was invisible to them. Worse, she was irrelevant. Marcus gestured towards Sarah with practiced magnanimity. "I'm sure Sarah agrees that this transition will benefit everyone involved. She's always been focused on what's best for the company and our family." 12 pairs of eyes turned toward her, expecting gratitude, expecting gracious acceptance, expecting her to smile and nod and disappear quietly into domestic obscurity. Sarah met each gaze steadily before responding. "Of course, I've always believed that the most important thing is ensuring that innovations reach their full potential and receive proper recognition." Marcus beamed, apparently hearing only agreement in her carefully chosen words. The board members smiled and nodded, satisfied that the messy business of transitioning her out had been handled smoothly. They had no idea that Sarah had just made them all witnesses to the beginning of the end of Marcus Chin's stolen empire. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, shaking Marcus's hand and congratulating him on his visionary leadership, Sarah remained seated. She watched her husband accept praise for work that had cost her years of her life, work that had earned him a reputation as one of the most innovative minds in technology. Marcus approached her after the room cleared, his expression showing just enough concern to maintain his image as a caring husband. "That went well. I know this transition might feel difficult, but you'll be happier focusing on home. You've never really enjoyed the business side of things anyway." Sarah stood slowly, gathering her notebook and purse with deliberate care. Her voice remained calm, controlled, giving no hint of the storm building within her. "You're absolutely right, Marcus. I've never been particularly interested in the business side of taking credit for other people's work." Marcus's smile flickered for just a moment before returning to full wattage. He reached out to touch her arm in what observers might interpret as a tender gesture. "I know you understand that this is what's best for everyone." Sarah looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up to his face. She saw the husband she had loved, the partner she had trusted, the man to whom she had given everything. She also saw something else now. Something that made her decision crystal clear. "I understand perfectly. And you're right about something else too. I have always been focused on what's best for the company. Now more than ever." As Sarah walked toward the elevator, her heels clicking softly on the polished marble floor, Marcus turned back to gather his presentation materials. He was already mentally preparing for the investor calls that would follow this successful board meeting, already calculating the valuation increases that his latest innovation would generate. He had no way of knowing that his wife had just spent the past hour mentally cataloging every stolen idea, every falsified attribution, every piece of evidence that would soon unravel everything he had built on her foundations. He could not have imagined that the woman he had just publicly dismissed as irrelevant was about to become the most dangerous threat his career had ever faced. The elevator doors closed behind Sarah with a soft chime, carrying her down toward a future that Marcus Chun could not even begin to foresee. 3 weeks after the board meeting, The San Francisco Convention Center buzzed with the energy of 5,000 technology professionals gathered for the annual TechVision Summit. Sarah sat in row M, seat 247, her press badge hanging from a lanyard around her neck. To the casual observer, she appeared to be just another attendee, perhaps a mid-level developer or project manager taking notes on industry trends. No one suspected that the woman in the unremarkable navy blazer held advanced degrees from MIT and Stanford, or that her research had fundamentally shaped the direction of artificial intelligence development over the past decade. On the massive stage before her, bathed in spotlights and surrounded by 3 enormous screens displaying complex algorithms, Marcus Chun commanded the attention of the entire auditorium. He had been selected as the keynote speaker based on his reputation as a visionary innovator, a self-made genius who had revolutionized machine learning applications. The conference program described him as the brilliant mind behind breakthrough technologies that had earned Chun Dynamics over $200 million in licensing deals. Sarah knew every line of code displayed on those screens. She had written them during a particularly intense 6-month period when she had barely left their basement laboratory, surviving on energy drinks and the thrill of discovering solutions to problems that had stumped researchers worldwide. The elegant mathematical frameworks that Marcus was explaining to the captivated audience had emerged from her mind during sleepless nights when inspiration struck like lightning. Marcus gestured confidently at a flowchart showing neural network architecture. This particular innovation took me almost 18 months to perfect. The breakthrough came during a period when I essentially lived in my laboratory, testing thousands of variations until I found the optimal configuration. Sarah's pen pressed harder against her notebook as she transcribed his words verbatim. Marcus had indeed spent time in a laboratory during those 18 months, but only to bring her meals and occasionally to sleep on the couch when she worked through the night. The laboratory he referenced belonged to her, hidden in the basement of their home, equipped with servers and development tools that she had purchased with her own consulting income years before Chun Dynamics had become profitable. The audience hung on every word as Marcus described the commercial applications of what he called his quantum-enhanced learning algorithm. Sarah watched 5,000 brilliant minds absorb her life's work as the product of his genius. She observed venture capitalists in the front rows taking notes, probably calculating investment opportunities. She saw graduate students recording every word, hoping to learn from a master. After the presentation concluded to thunderous applause, Marcus participated in a press conference in the adjacent media room. Sarah positioned herself near the back, close enough to hear, but far enough away to avoid recognition. Technology reporters from major publications gathered around Marcus, their digital recorders capturing every response. Jessica Morrison from TechCrunch leaned forward with her first question. Marcus, your rapid rise in the AI field has been remarkable. Can you tell us about your background and how you developed such advanced expertise so quickly? Marcus smiled with practiced humility, his response flowing smoothly, as if rehearsed. I've always been passionate about pushing the boundaries of what machines can accomplish. My approach is purely intuitive. I see patterns where others see chaos. When I started Chun Dynamics 15 years ago, I was working 18-hour days, developing algorithms by hand, testing theories that most people considered impossible. Sarah bit her lower lip hard enough to taste blood. 15 years ago, Marcus had been a marketing executive at a mid-sized software company with no technical background beyond basic business applications. She had been the one working 18-hour days, the one developing algorithms, the one testing impossible theories. Marcus had been the one who convinced her that they should start a company together, that her innovations needed his business expertise to reach the market. Another reporter raised her hand. David Kim from Wired magazine. There are very few truly self-made success stories in tech anymore. Most breakthroughs come from large teams or well-funded research institutions. How did you manage to achieve such sophisticated results, essentially working alone? Self-made. The phrase hit Sarah like a physical blow. Marcus's expression grew thoughtful as he crafted his response. I've been incredibly fortunate to have a supportive family environment that allows me to focus completely on innovation. My wife, Sarah, understands that revolutionary work requires total dedication. She's been wonderful about handling all the domestic responsibilities so I can concentrate on research. She brings me coffee during late-night coding sessions and makes sure I remember to eat when I'm in the zone. The assembled reporters chuckled appreciatively at the image of the devoted wife supporting her brilliant husband. Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks as she listened to her contributions reduced to coffee delivery and meal reminders. The woman who had earned a doctorate in computer science at 24, who had published groundbreaking research in 3 major journals, who had developed algorithms that were now being licensed by Fortune 500 companies worldwide, had been characterized as a helpful domestic assistant. Marcus continued building his mythology. I think the key to breakthrough innovation is having the mental space to think deeply about complex problems. When you don't have to worry about mundane details, when you have someone who believes in your vision enough to handle everything else, that's when true creativity can flourish. Sarah has been instrumental in creating that environment. Sarah methodically wrote down every word, her handwriting growing smaller and more precise with each fabrication. She had learned long ago that documentation would be crucial, though at the time she had not imagined it would serve as evidence of systematic fraud rather than simply ensuring proper attribution for collaborative work. The press conference concluded with Marcus posing for photographs and exchanging business cards with reporters who were already planning follow-up interviews. Sarah slipped out quietly, walking through the convention center corridors toward the parking garage. Her phone buzzed with a text message as she reached her car. The message was from Rebecca Wong, a patent attorney whose reputation for handling complex intellectual property cases had made her one of the most sought-after legal minds in Silicon Valley. Rebecca had been Sarah's roommate at MIT, and their friendship had endured despite taking very different career paths. More importantly, Rebecca specialized in cases where brilliant innovations had been stolen by people who lacked the expertise to create them independently. The text was brief. Watch the live stream of Marcus's keynote. We need to talk. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? Sarah stared at the message for several minutes before responding. The decision to contact Rebecca 3 days earlier had been impulsive, born from watching Marcus accept yet another industry award for her work. But now, after witnessing his complete erasure of her contributions in front of thousands of witnesses, the path forward seemed inevitable. She typed her response. I'll be there at 9. And Rebecca, bring your strongest coffee. This is going to be a very long conversation. The next morning, Rebecca's office on the 38th floor of a downtown San Francisco high-rise offered a panoramic view of the bay. Sarah sat across from her former roommate, watching Rebecca review the preliminary materials she had brought. The file contained 15 years of documentation that Sarah had meticulously maintained, originally intended to protect their joint intellectual property, but now serving as evidence of systematic theft. Rebecca looked up from a thick folder containing printed emails, development notes, and time-stamped research files. Sarah, I've been practicing patent law for 12 years, and I've never seen documentation this comprehensive. You've essentially created a complete record of intellectual property development that proves Marcus has been falsely claiming authorship of your innovations. Sarah opened her laptop and showed Rebecca a secure folder containing thousands of additional files. This is just the beginning. I've been backing up everything to encrypted servers since we started the company. Every email where Marcus asked me to explain technical concepts he claimed to have invented. Every development session where I walked him through code he later presented as his own work. Every late-night conversation where I solved problems he took credit for solving. Rebecca scrolled through file after file, her expression growing more serious with each discovery. Some of these emails show Marcus explicitly asking you to explain algorithms that he later claimed to have invented independently. This one from last March has him saying he doesn't understand how the neural network architecture functions, followed by your detailed explanation, followed by him presenting that exact architecture at a conference 3 weeks later as his breakthrough innovation. The evidence was overwhelming, but Sarah had not finished revealing the scope of Marcus's deception. She pulled out a tablet and opened a secure application that showed real-time data from servers in their home basement. Rebecca, I want to show you something that Marcus doesn't know exists. The tablet displayed a sophisticated laboratory management system tracking ongoing research projects, experimental results, and development timelines. Rebecca stared at the screen, trying to process what she was seeing. Sarah, this looks like the kind of research facility that major corporations spend millions to build. How long have you been operating this? Since before we started Chin Dynamics. I set it up during graduate school and have been expanding it ever since. Marcus thinks I spend my time in the basement doing laundry and organizing household items. He has no idea that I've been conducting advanced research that's 3 to 5 years ahead of anything Chin Dynamics has publicly announced. Rebecca leaned forward, her attorney instincts recognizing the significance of what Sarah was revealing. Are you telling me that you've been developing breakthrough technologies in secret while Marcus takes credit for innovations that are actually years behind your current work? Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks, but it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had been systematically underestimated and was about to prove exactly how dangerous that mistake could be. Rebecca, Marcus is planning to announce what he calls his next revolutionary breakthrough at the investor meeting next month. He's been promising our board and potential investors that this innovation will position Chin Dynamics as the undisputed leader in artificial intelligence applications. She paused, letting the implications sink in before delivering the crucial information. The technology he plans to announce doesn't exist yet. At least, not in any form that Marcus understands or could possibly implement. He's essentially promising to deliver something that only I know how to build, using research that only I have access to, based on mathematical frameworks that only I have developed. Rebecca set down the tablet and leaned back in her chair, processing the full scope of the situation. Sarah, what you're describing isn't just patent infringement or academic plagiarism. If Marcus is making promises to investors about technologies he can't deliver, technologies that belong to you, this could constitute securities fraud. Sarah nodded slowly. And Rebecca, there's something else. The investor meeting isn't just about securing additional funding. Marcus has been negotiating to sell Chin Dynamics to a consortium led by Apex Technologies. The valuation is based entirely on the intellectual property portfolio that he claims to have developed independently. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of San Francisco traffic far below. Rebecca understood the implications immediately. If Marcus completed the sale based on fraudulent claims about intellectual property ownership, the legal consequences would extend far beyond civil patent disputes into federal criminal territory. Sarah opened another folder on her laptop, revealing financial documents and communication records. I've been documenting everything, Rebecca. Every false claim, every stolen innovation, every promise made to investors based on my work. Marcus thinks he's selling a company built on his genius. What he's actually trying to sell is 15 years of my research under false pretenses. Rebecca stood and walked to her window, looking out at the city where fortunes were made and lost based on innovation and intellectual property. When she turned back to Sarah, her expression showed the focused intensity that had made her one of the most successful patent attorneys on the West Coast. Sarah, we're not just talking about reclaiming credit for your innovations or securing fair compensation for stolen intellectual property. What you're describing could completely destroy Marcus's career and potentially result in criminal charges for fraud. Are you prepared for that level of consequences? Sarah thought about the board meeting where Marcus had dismissed her as irrelevant. She remembered the press conference where he had reduced her contributions to coffee delivery. She considered the 15 years of systematic erasure, the countless nights when she had celebrated breakthrough discoveries alone while Marcus slept, the gradual transformation from equal partner to invisible assistant. Rebecca, I spent 15 years building something extraordinary, something that could change how artificial intelligence shapes our world. I did it because I believed Marcus and I were partners, because I trusted him to ensure that our innovations reached their full potential. Instead, he's been systematically stealing credit for my life's work while positioning me as nothing more than a supportive wife who should be grateful for the opportunity to step aside. She closed her laptop with decisive finality. I'm not just prepared for those consequences, Rebecca. I'm counting on them. The Chin Dynamics headquarters gleamed under the October evening lights, its glass facade reflecting the celebratory glow emanating from the 40th floor executive conference room. 200 guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, their conversations mixing with the soft jazz ensemble that Marcus had hired to commemorate the company's 15th anniversary. Sarah moved through the crowd like a ghost at her own funeral, watching colleagues and industry leaders celebrate a history that had been systematically rewritten to erase her existence. She paused near the memory wall that Marcus had commissioned for tonight's event, studying the timeline of company milestones displayed in elegant frames along the corridor. According to this official history, Chun Dynamics had been founded by visionary entrepreneur Marcus Chun, who had developed breakthrough technologies through a combination of technical brilliance and tireless dedication. The narrative spoke of a lone genius working 18-hour days in a converted garage, driven by an innovative vision that would eventually revolutionize artificial intelligence applications. Sarah searched the timeline for any mention of her contributions, any acknowledgement of the partnership that had actually built this empire. She found nothing. Not her name on the founding documents, though she had provided the initial capital from her consulting income. Not her research that had produced their first commercial breakthrough, though her doctoral thesis had laid the theoretical foundation. Not her laboratory that had generated every subsequent innovation, though she had spent years developing the methodologies that Marcus now claimed as his proprietary approach. The revisionist history was so complete that Sarah began to question her own memories. Had she imagined 15 years of partnership? Had she fabricated the countless nights spent solving impossible problems while Marcus slept? Had she dreamed the moment-by-moment development of technologies that were now worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Marcus stood near the main display, surrounded by admirers who hung on every word of his origin story. He gestured dramatically as he described the eureka moment when he had supposedly discovered the mathematical principles underlying their quantum encryption algorithm. Sarah remembered that night differently. She remembered Marcus finding her at 3 a.m, hunched over equations in their basement laboratory, crying with exhaustion and frustration. She remembered explaining the breakthrough she had just achieved, watching his eyes light up with possibilities she had not yet considered. She remembered feeling grateful for his business acumen, his ability to translate her innovations into commercial success. She had never imagined that gratitude would become the foundation of her own erasure. Tonight's celebration included the launch of an official company biography, copies of which were displayed on elegant stands throughout the reception area. Sarah picked up one of the leather-bound volumes and flipped through pages that chronicled Marcus's journey from ambitious startup founder to industry titan. The book contained detailed technical explanations of breakthrough innovations, all attributed to Marcus's genius. Photographs showed him working alone in laboratories, presenting at conferences, accepting awards for revolutionary contributions to artificial intelligence research. Sarah appeared in exactly 3 photographs across 200 pages. In one, she stood beside Marcus at their wedding, described in the caption as his supportive wife who understood the demands of innovative work. In another, she was part of a group photo at a company picnic, unlabeled among the employees celebrating another successful quarter. The third showed her serving refreshments at a board meeting, identified simply as Marcus Chen's wife, Sarah. The woman who had developed the core technologies that built Chun Dynamics had been reduced to a footnote in her own company's history. Marcus approached her as she stood reading the biography, his expression showing the careful concern of a husband monitoring his wife's emotional state during what he undoubtedly considered his moment of ultimate triumph. He placed a proprietary hand on her lower back, a gesture that projected intimacy while asserting control. "Sarah, you've been quiet tonight. I hope you're enjoying the celebration. This milestone belongs to both of us, in our own ways." Sarah closed the biography carefully, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Marcus, I've been reading about the company's remarkable journey. It's fascinating to see how history gets recorded." Marcus's smile flickered slightly as he detected something unexpected in her tone. He guided her away from the crowd, toward a quieter corner where they could speak privately. "I know tonight might feel overwhelming. Seeing everything we've built, all the recognition for the work that's consumed so much of my time over the years. But you've been an essential part of this journey, Sarah. Your support has made everything possible." Sarah studied her husband's face, searching for any acknowledgement of the reality they had shared for 15 years. She found only the confident expression of a man who had convinced himself that his fabricated history had become actual truth. "Marcus, when you tell people about developing these technologies, do you ever think about the basement laboratory where they were actually created?" Marcus's expression grew slightly impatient, as if Sarah was missing the point of their success. The basement setup was useful for early prototyping, but real innovation happens when you can see the big picture. When you can envision how breakthrough concepts can transform entire industries. That's the kind of vision that built Chin Dynamics. Before Sarah could respond, Marcus's assistant Jennifer approached with an urgent expression. She was 26 years old, brilliant, ambitious, and completely convinced that Marcus Chun was the innovative genius his reputation suggested. Jennifer had joined the company 6 months earlier with an MBA from Wharton and absolute faith in Marcus's technical expertise. Marcus, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Apex Technologies representatives are ready for the private briefing about the partnership announcement. Marcus straightened his tie, the gesture Sarah recognized as preparation for particularly bold deception. He turned back to Sarah with an expression that suggested she should be excited about what he was about to reveal. This is actually perfect timing. Sarah, I wanted you to hear this directly from me. We're announcing a strategic partnership with Apex Technologies tomorrow. They're investing $500 million based on our upcoming breakthrough in predictive artificial intelligence. Sarah felt the room temperature drop several degrees as the implications hit her. The predictive AI system that Marcus was promising to Apex existed only in her basement laboratory. The theoretical frameworks underlying the technology were documented in research notebooks that Marcus had never seen. The algorithms required to implement the system were stored on servers that only she could access. Marcus was promising to deliver something that only she could build, using research that belonged entirely to her, without any intention of acknowledging her contributions or involving her in the development process. Jennifer beamed with excitement as she added details that made Sarah's situation even clearer. The partnership includes exclusive licensing rights to the predictive AI technology, plus an acquisition option that would value Chin Dynamics at over $2 billion. Marcus, this could be the deal that establishes you as one of the most successful innovators in Silicon Valley history. Sarah's voice remained steady despite the fury building in her chest. Marcus, exactly which predictive AI technology are you planning to license to Apex? Marcus's confidence never wavered as he delivered the answer that would destroy any remaining illusions Sarah maintained about their partnership. The breakthrough system I've been developing for the past 8 months. The one that can predict market fluctuations, consumer behavior patterns, and emerging technology trends with unprecedented accuracy. Apex has seen the preliminary demonstrations, and they believe it will revolutionize how corporations make strategic decisions. Sarah knew that Marcus had never seen any demonstrations of her predictive AI system because none existed outside her private laboratory. The preliminary results he had shown to Apex must have been fabricated entirely, promises of capabilities that he could not possibly deliver without her direct involvement. He was selling something that belonged to her while ensuring that she would never receive credit or compensation for creating it. Jennifer excused herself to prepare for the Apex briefing, leaving Sarah and Marcus alone in their corner of the reception. The celebration continued around them, but Sarah felt as if she were standing in the eye of a hurricane that was about to devastate everything Marcus had built on her stolen foundations. Marcus, I need to ask you something directly, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Marcus nodded indulgently, apparently confident that he could handle whatever concerns his wife might raise about business matters she couldn't possibly understand fully. In 15 years of marriage and business partnership, have I ever contributed anything meaningful to Chin Dynamics beyond emotional support and domestic assistance? Marcus's expression shifted to the patronizing smile he used when explaining complex concepts to people he considered intellectually inferior. Sarah, you're being too hard on yourself. You've contributed enormously to our success, creating a stable home environment, managing social obligations, handling the administrative details that allow me to focus on innovation. Those contributions are invaluable, even if they don't appear in technical documentation or patent filings. Sarah felt something crystallize inside her chest, a clarity that was both liberating and terrifying. Marcus, I've been developing artificial intelligence systems since before we met. I have a doctorate in computer science from MIT. I've published research in major journals that laid the groundwork for everything Chin Dynamics has achieved. I built the laboratory where every one of our breakthrough technologies was actually created. I wrote the code, developed the algorithms, and solved the mathematical problems that you've been claiming as your own innovations for 15 years. Marcus's smile remained fixed, but his eyes showed the first hint of uncertainty. Sarah, I think the stress of tonight might be affecting your perspective. Innovation is a complex process that involves many different types of contributions: business vision, market analysis, strategic planning. The technical implementation is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Sarah stepped closer to her husband, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more force than shouting would have achieved. Marcus, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The predictive AI system that you just promised to Apex Technologies doesn't exist in any form that you could possibly deliver. The research belongs to me. The algorithms belong to me. The laboratory where it would need to be completed belongs to me. You have just committed fraud against a $500 million partner by promising to deliver something that you could never build without my direct involvement. Marcus's patronizing expression evaporated, replaced by something harder and more calculating. His voice carried a warning that Sarah had never heard directed at her before. Sarah, I think you need to be very careful about making accusations that you couldn't possibly prove. Chin Dynamics is my company. The innovations belong to me. The partnership with Apex is my deal. If you try to interfere with any of this, you'll discover exactly how much power you actually have in this situation. Sarah met his stare without flinching. And what exactly would that interference look like, Marcus? Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper that revealed the man behind the polished facade. It would look like a bitter wife who can't accept that her husband's success doesn't depend on her imaginary contributions. It would look like someone who needs professional help to deal with delusions about her own importance. It would look like grounds for a divorce that would leave you with nothing while I retain full ownership of everything I've built. The threat hung between them like a blade, sharp and unmistakable. Sarah realized that Marcus was prepared to destroy her completely rather than acknowledge any aspect of her contributions to their shared success. He would rather paint her as mentally unstable than admit that his reputation had been built on stolen innovations. Sarah nodded slowly, her decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. Thank you for being so direct, Marcus. It helps to understand exactly where we stand. Marcus straightened his tie once more and returned to his public persona. I'm glad we could clear this up. Now, I need to take care of the Apex briefing. Enjoy the rest of the celebration. After all, this success belongs to both of us, in our own ways. As Marcus walked away to join the Apex representatives, Sarah remained in the corner, watching the man she had loved and trusted systematically destroy any possibility of reconciliation. She pulled out her phone and opened her text messages, scrolling to Rebecca Wong's contact information. Her fingers moved across the screen with absolute certainty as she typed her message. Rebecca, I've made my decision. Tomorrow morning, we begin the nuclear option. Bring everything you have, and prepare for a war that will either restore the truth or destroy us all in the process. She sent the message and slipped her phone back into her purse. Around her, the celebration continued, but Sarah was no longer part of their reality. She was already operating in a future where Marcus Chin's stolen empire would either acknowledge the truth of its foundations or collapse entirely under the weight of 15 years of systematic fraud. The war for her stolen life had officially begun. The morning after the anniversary celebration, Rebecca Wong's law office resembled a war room more than a traditional legal practice. Conference tables that normally hosted contract negotiations now groaned under the weight of 15 years of documentation that Sarah had methodically assembled. Printed emails covered every available surface, organized by date and cross-referenced with patent filings that told a story of systematic intellectual property theft spanning the entire history of Chin Dynamics. Sarah sat across from Rebecca, watching her former MIT roommate work with the focused intensity that had made her one of Silicon Valley's most feared patent attorneys. Rebecca's team of junior associates moved through the evidence like archaeologists uncovering artifacts of a vanished civilization, each discovery adding another piece to a puzzle that revealed the true scope of Marcus's deception. Rebecca held up a patent application dated 3 years earlier, comparing it to a research notebook that Sarah had maintained during the same period. Sarah, this is extraordinary. The mathematical frameworks in Marcus's patent filing are identical to the equations in your laboratory notes, but your notes are timestamped 6 months before his application was submitted. Sarah opened her laptop and navigated to a secure folder containing thousands of additional files. That's just the beginning. I've been documenting everything since we started the company, originally to protect our joint intellectual property. I never imagined I'd need it as evidence of fraud. The laptop screen displayed a database that Sarah had built to track every innovation developed in her basement laboratory. Each entry contained detailed development timelines, experimental results, and cross-references to corresponding patent filings. Rebecca stared at the systematically organized evidence, recognizing that Sarah had unknowingly created the most comprehensive case for intellectual property theft she had ever encountered. Junior associate David Martinez looked up from a stack of communication records, his expression showing the excitement of someone who had just discovered smoking gun evidence. Rebecca, you need to see this. I've been analyzing the email forensics that Sarah provided, and there's a clear pattern of systematic deletion and revision. He pointed to a series of technical discussions between Sarah and Marcus from their early years, showing detailed exchanges where Sarah explained complex algorithms to her husband. The metadata revealed that Marcus had gone back and deleted Sarah's contributions to these conversations, leaving only his responses that made it appear as if he had developed the innovations independently. Rebecca examined the forensic evidence with growing amazement. David, this shows deliberate manipulation of communication records to falsify the development history of their breakthrough technologies. Marcus didn't just steal Sarah's innovations. He actively erased evidence of her contributions. Sarah pulled out a tablet and opened an application that she had built to monitor patent databases worldwide. The screen displayed search results that she had been compiling for the past month, cross-referencing every patent filed by Chun Dynamics with her original research documentation. Rebecca, I've identified 47 separate patents where Marcus claimed exclusive authorship of innovations that I actually developed. The applications include detailed technical specifications that could only have been written by someone with intimate knowledge of my research methodologies. Rebecca scrolled through the database results, her legal mind calculating the implications of such comprehensive fraud. Sarah, if we can prove that Marcus knowingly filed false patent applications, this goes far beyond civil intellectual property disputes. Deliberately providing false information to the Patent Office constitutes federal fraud, which carries criminal penalties, including prison time. The investigation had revealed that Marcus's deception extended into areas that even Sarah had not fully realized. Associate Attorney Jennifer Park had spent the morning contacting Sarah's former colleagues and research partners, documenting a pattern of testimony that would destroy Marcus's credibility as an independent innovator. Jennifer approached their table with a notepad filled with interview summaries. Sarah, I've spoken with 12 researchers who worked with you during your graduate studies and early career. Every single one of them confirms that you were the technical genius behind innovations that Marcus has been claiming as his solo achievements. She flipped through her notes, reading selected quotes that painted a clear picture of Sarah's actual contributions. Professor Elizabeth Hammond from MIT said that your doctoral thesis laid the theoretical groundwork for artificial intelligence applications that didn't become commercially viable until years later. She specifically remembers Marcus attending your dissertation defense and asking basic questions about concepts that he now claims to have invented. Sarah nodded grimly as memories of that defense came flooding back. Marcus had been in the audience as her supportive boyfriend, struggling to understand mathematical concepts that she had spent years developing. The irony of him later claiming to have discovered those same concepts independently would have been laughable if the consequences had not been so devastating to her career. Jennifer continued reading from her interviews. Dr. Michael Torres from Stanford said that when you collaborated on the neural network research that became the foundation for Chun Dynamics' first major breakthrough, Marcus was essentially a silent partner who handled business development while you did all the technical work. He said that anyone in the field who knew you both understood that Marcus's role was limited to commercialization and marketing. Rebecca stood and walked to a whiteboard where her team had been mapping the timeline of patent filings against Sarah's documented innovations. The visual representation told a story that would be impossible for Marcus to explain away in court. Every major breakthrough that had built Chun Dynamics' reputation could be traced back to Sarah's original research, often predating Marcus's patent applications by months or years. Sarah, this level of documentation is unprecedented. Most intellectual property theft cases involve disputed authorship of one or two innovations, where the evidence is ambiguous and the parties have competing claims. What you've assembled proves systematic fraud spanning 15 years and covering the entire foundation of Chun Dynamics' technology portfolio. Sarah opened another folder on her laptop, revealing financial documents that told an even more damning story. Rebecca, there's something else that Marcus doesn't know I've been tracking. The revenue generated by technologies that he's falsely claimed as his own innovations. The spreadsheet displayed licensing deals, partnership agreements, and acquisition offers that Chun Dynamics had received based on Marcus's fraudulent patent portfolio. The numbers were staggering, representing hundreds of millions of dollars in value that had been built on stolen intellectual property. Rebecca studied the financial analysis with growing recognition of how completely this evidence would destroy Marcus's defense. Sarah, this shows that Marcus hasn't just stolen credit for your innovations. He's been profiting enormously from intellectual property that belongs to you. The licensing revenue alone from technologies that you actually developed exceeds $200 million. While Sarah and Rebecca's team methodically assembled their case, Marcus remained completely oblivious to the investigation that would soon destroy everything he had built on stolen foundations. That same morning, he sat in his executive office celebrating what he believed would be his greatest triumph, the partnership deal with Apex Technologies that would establish him as one of Silicon Valley's most successful innovators. Marcus's assistant Jennifer had prepared a media strategy to maximize the publicity surrounding the Apex announcement. Press releases had been distributed to major technology publications, emphasizing Marcus's role as the visionary genius behind breakthrough innovations that would revolutionize artificial intelligence applications. Television interviews were scheduled with business networks eager to profile the self-made entrepreneur who had built a billion-dollar empire through pure intellectual brilliance. Marcus reviewed the talking points that Jennifer had prepared, practicing responses to questions about his innovative methodologies and development processes. He felt confident in his ability to handle any technical inquiries, having spent years absorbing Sarah's explanations until he could discuss her innovations as if he understood their underlying principles. The distinction between understanding someone else's work and creating original innovations had blurred in his mind until he genuinely believed his own fabricated history. His phone buzzed with a text message from the Apex Technologies CEO confirming their afternoon meeting to finalize partnership details. Marcus smiled as he calculated the valuation increases that this deal would generate, imagining the industry recognition that would follow his success in delivering breakthrough technology ahead of schedule. Marcus had no way of knowing that 3 miles away, Sarah was quietly transferring her most advanced research to secure servers that only she could access. The predictive AI system that he had promised to Apex existed in far more sophisticated form than he had claimed, but it resided entirely within Sarah's private laboratory and required proprietary algorithms that she had never shared with anyone. Sarah's fingers moved across her keyboard with practiced efficiency as she executed security protocols that would prevent Marcus from accessing any aspect of her ongoing research. Years of cautious planning had prepared her for this moment, ensuring that her most valuable innovations remained completely outside the reach of the man who had stolen everything else she had created. Rebecca approached Sarah's workstation with a document that would serve as the foundation for their legal strategy. Sarah, we're ready to begin filing the patent infringement claims. Based on the evidence you've provided, we can establish clear ownership of every major innovation that Marcus has falsely attributed to himself. Sarah paused in her file transfers to review the legal paperwork that would officially begin the destruction of Marcus's stolen empire. The comprehensive nature of their case would make it impossible for him to claim ignorance or dispute the evidence of systematic fraud. Rebecca, how long do you estimate it will take for the Patent Office to process our claims and begin the investigation into Marcus's false filings? Rebecca consulted her timeline analysis. calculating the bureaucratic processes that would soon engulf Marcus in legal proceedings he could never have anticipated. Given the scope of the evidence and the clear pattern of fraudulent applications, I expect the preliminary investigation to begin within 2 weeks. Once they start examining the documentation you've provided, the case will move very quickly. Sarah saved her final file transfer and closed her laptop, knowing that she had just completed the last step in protecting 15 years of stolen innovations from further exploitation. Marcus would soon discover that the woman he had dismissed as irrelevant possessed the power to unravel everything he had built on her foundations. The afternoon sun streamed through Rebecca's office windows as Sarah gathered her documentation, preparing to return home, where Marcus would be celebrating partnership deals based on technology that belonged entirely to her. She felt a strange calm settling over her, the peace that comes from finally taking action after years of systematic humiliation. Rebecca walked Sarah to the elevator, both women understanding that they had just initiated proceedings that would either restore justice or destroy everyone involved in the process. Sarah, once we file these claims, there's no going back. Marcus will fight this with every resource at his disposal, and the outcome will determine whether truth or power ultimately prevails. Sarah stepped into the elevator and turned back to face her former roommate, her expression showing the resolve of someone who had finally decided to risk everything for the chance to reclaim her stolen life. Rebecca, I spent 15 years building something extraordinary while trusting someone I thought was my partner. I won't spend the next 15 years watching him profit from my innovations while I remain invisible. As the elevator doors closed, Sarah felt the weight of decision settling around her like armor. The investigation was complete, the evidence was overwhelming, and the legal machinery that would destroy Marcus's fraudulent empire was already beginning to turn. Tomorrow, the man who had stolen her life's work would begin to discover the true cost of underestimating the woman whose genius had made his success possible. The Apex Technologies auditorium buzzed with the electric anticipation of 500 of Silicon Valley's most influential investors, technology executives, and media representatives. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over mahogany conference tables where billion-dollar deals had been negotiated, while 3 massive projection screens dominated the front of the room. Today's presentation would determine whether Chain Dynamics would secure the largest technology partnership in the company's history, valued at over $500 million with acquisition options that could reach $2 billion. Marcus Chun stood backstage, adjusting his platinum cufflinks and reviewing the final slides of what he believed would be the crowning achievement of his career. His custom-tailored charcoal suit had been designed by the same Milan tailor who dressed tech titans and Fortune 500 CEOs. At 52, Marcus possessed the commanding presence of someone who had never been questioned, never been challenged, never been forced to prove that his reputation matched his actual capabilities. The introduction began with thunderous applause as Apex Technologies CEO Victoria Sterling took the stage. Sterling was a legend in Silicon Valley, known for her ability to identify breakthrough innovations years before they reached mainstream adoption. Her endorsement of Marcus's work carried weight that extended far beyond financial backing into the realm of industry validation that money could never purchase. Sterling's voice carried the authority of someone who had built 3 separate billion-dollar companies. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce a visionary whose innovations have fundamentally reshaped our understanding of artificial intelligence applications. Marcus Chun's breakthrough technologies have generated over $200 million in licensing revenue while establishing new paradigms for machine learning implementation. Today, he will unveil his most ambitious innovation yet, a predictive artificial intelligence system that represents the next evolutionary step in strategic decision-making technology. The audience erupted in applause as Marcus strode onto the stage with the confidence of someone who had delivered hundreds of presentations to increasingly prestigious venues. He had perfected the art of translating complex technical concepts into compelling business narratives, a skill that had made him one of the most sought-after speakers at technology conferences worldwide. Today's audience included venture capitalists whose combined investment portfolios exceeded $50 billion, technology journalists whose articles could determine the success or failure of entire companies, and corporate executives who controlled purchasing decisions for Fortune 500 enterprises. Marcus began his presentation with practiced humility, his voice carrying just enough nervousness to suggest authentic passion rather than calculated performance. Thank you, Victoria, for that generous introduction. 15 years ago, I started Chin Dynamics with nothing but a vision and an unshakable belief that artificial intelligence could solve problems that human analysis alone could never address. Today, I stand before you ready to demonstrate that vision in its most sophisticated form. The first projection screen displayed a timeline showing Chin Dynamics' evolution from startup to industry leader, emphasizing breakthrough innovations that had established Marcus's reputation as a technical visionary. Each milestone was accompanied by photographs of Marcus presenting at conferences, accepting awards, and demonstrating technologies that had revolutionized multiple industries. The narrative portrayed a brilliant inventor whose solitary genius had produced a series of interconnected innovations that built upon each other in increasingly sophisticated applications. Marcus clicked to his next slide, revealing a complex flowchart that outlined the architecture of his promised predictive AI system. This breakthrough represents the culmination of everything I've learned about machine learning optimization, neural network configuration, and data pattern recognition. The system can analyze millions of variables simultaneously, identifying emerging trends with accuracy rates that exceed 98% across multiple industries and market sectors. The audience leaned forward as Marcus described commercial applications that would transform how corporations approach strategic planning. Investment firms could predict market fluctuations weeks in advance. Pharmaceutical companies could identify promising research directions before competitors recognized emerging opportunities. Technology companies could anticipate consumer preferences and develop products that would dominate markets that didn't yet exist. Marcus's confidence grew as he delivered technical explanations that demonstrated his apparent mastery of concepts that had taken decades to develop. He described algorithmic innovations with the fluency of someone who had lived and breathed every aspect of their creation. The mathematical frameworks underlying predictive analysis, the computational strategies required for real-time data processing, the software architecture needed to scale across enterprise applications. Every detail suggested intimate familiarity with innovations that had emerged from years of dedicated research. Venture capitalist Harrison Webb raised his hand during the question period. Marcus, the sophistication of what you're describing suggests breakthrough innovations in multiple technical areas simultaneously. Can you walk us through your development methodology and timeline for achieving these advances? Marcus smiled with practiced confidence as he launched into the fabricated narrative that he had perfected over 15 years of systematic deception. Harrison, this system represents the natural evolution of research methodologies I've been developing since founding Chin Dynamics. My approach has always been intuitive rather than traditional. I see patterns where conventional analysis identifies only chaos. When I started working on predictive algorithms 8 months ago, I essentially locked myself in my laboratory and refused to emerge until I had solved the fundamental mathematical problems that had been limiting artificial intelligence applications. The audience murmured appreciatively at the image of the dedicated genius sacrificing everything for breakthrough innovation. Marcus continued building his mythology, describing sleepless nights spent refining algorithms, eureka moments when impossible problems suddenly revealed elegant solutions, and the methodical testing process that had validated his theoretical frameworks through practical application. Technology journalist Patricia Williams from Forbes followed up with a more specific question. Marcus, the patent applications for the underlying technologies show filing dates spanning several years. Can you explain how your recent breakthrough builds upon this earlier foundational work? Marcus's expression showed just enough technical passion to suggest authentic expertise. Patricia, that's an excellent question that gets to the heart of how breakthrough innovation actually develops. The foundational patents represent building blocks that I've been developing incrementally, each one solving specific technical challenges that needed to be addressed before the comprehensive system could be implemented. Think of them as pieces of a puzzle that only recently revealed how they fit together into something revolutionary. The audience was completely captivated by Marcus's performance. His explanations demonstrated apparent mastery of technologies that represented the cutting edge of artificial intelligence research. Investment commitments were being calculated in real time as venture capitalists recognized the commercial potential of innovations that could transform multiple industries simultaneously. Marcus had reached the crescendo of his presentation, the moment when he would demonstrate the actual capabilities of his predictive AI system, when the auditorium doors opened with dramatic suddenness. Sarah Chun entered flanked by patent attorney Rebecca Wong and 3 officials from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Their arrival created an immediate disturbance as audience members turned to identify the source of the interruption. Sarah walked down the center aisle with the measured pace of someone who had planned this moment for weeks. She wore a navy business suit that projected professional competence rather than the submissive domesticity that Marcus's public narrative had attributed to her. Her expression showed the calm determination of someone who had finally decided to reclaim 15 years of stolen recognition. Patent Office Official Director James Morrison approached the stage with legal documents in hand, his presence immediately transforming the celebratory atmosphere into something charged with legal tension. Director Morrison's reputation for handling high-profile intellectual property cases was well known throughout Silicon Valley, and his appearance at Marcus's presentation sent waves of concern through the audience. Morrison's voice carried the authority of federal law enforcement as he addressed the suddenly silent auditorium. "Mr. Chun, I am Director James Morrison from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I am here to serve you with cease and desist orders regarding 47 patents filed under your name that our investigation has determined contain fraudulent authorship claims." The projection screens that had been displaying Marcus's technical innovations suddenly switched to documents showing patent applications with Sarah's name listed as the actual inventor. Timestamps and development notes proved that every breakthrough technology Marcus had claimed as his independent creation had actually originated from Sarah's research, often predating his applications by months or years. Marcus's confident facade began to crack as he stared at evidence that he had never imagined could exist. "How did you obtain access to those documents?" "Those represent proprietary research methodologies developed exclusively by Chun Dynamics under my direct supervision." Rebecca Wong stepped forward with a briefcase containing 15 years of comprehensive documentation. "Mr. Chun, Dr. Sarah Chun has been meticulously documenting her intellectual property development since before Chun Dynamics was founded. Every innovation you've claimed as your independent creation can be traced to her original research through time-stamped laboratory notes, email communications, and development records that establish clear authorship." The audience watched in stunned silence as evidence mounted that systematically destroyed Marcus's credibility as an independent innovator. Sarah's doctoral thesis was displayed on the projection screens, showing theoretical frameworks that had later appeared in Marcus's patent applications without any attribution to her foundational research. Email forensics revealed Marcus explicitly asking Sarah to explain technical concepts that he subsequently claimed to have invented independently. Director Morrison continued his methodical presentation of evidence that would destroy any possibility of Marcus maintaining his fraudulent claims. "Mr. Chun, our investigation has revealed that the predictive artificial intelligence system you've been promising to Apex Technologies exists only in Dr. Chen's private laboratory, using algorithms that she developed independently and has never shared with Chun Dynamics or any other commercial entity." Victoria Sterling stood from her front row seat, her expression showing the shock of someone who had just discovered that her company's largest investment was based on completely fabricated claims. "Marcus, are you telling me that the technology you've been promising to deliver belongs to someone else entirely?" Marcus's desperation became visible as he realized that 15 years of careful deception were unraveling in front of the most important audience of his career. "Victoria, I think there's been some misunderstanding about collaborative development processes. Sarah has certainly been involved in supporting roles, but the innovative breakthroughs have always emerged from my vision and technical leadership." Sarah finally spoke, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades mastering concepts that Marcus could barely comprehend. "Marcus, Would you like to explain to this audience how you developed quantum encryption algorithms without understanding the mathematical principles underlying quantum mechanics? Or perhaps you could describe your methodology for creating neural network architectures when your technical background extends only to basic business applications. The projection screens displayed security footage from their home laboratory, showing Sarah working alone on innovations that Marcus had later presented as his breakthrough discoveries. The visual evidence made it impossible for anyone to maintain illusions about who had actually developed the technologies that built Chun Dynamics' reputation. Venture capitalist Harrison Webb stood and began gathering his materials, his investment interest evaporating as the legal implications became clear. Marcus, I don't think Apex Technologies or any other serious investor can proceed with partnership discussions while these authorship questions remain unresolved. One by one, the audience members who had arrived prepared to commit hundreds of millions of dollars to Marcus's innovations began filing toward the exits. The man who had entered the auditorium as Silicon Valley's newest technology titan was watching his empire collapse under the weight of evidence that his entire career had been built on stolen intellectual property. Sarah remained at the front of the auditorium as the crowd dispersed, watching Marcus confront the reality that his 15 years of systematic theft had finally been exposed to the people whose opinions determined success or failure in Silicon Valley. The woman he had dismissed as irrelevant had just demonstrated that she possessed the power to destroy everything he had built on her stolen foundations. Director Morrison approached Marcus with additional legal documents that would formally begin federal fraud investigations. Mr. Chun, you'll need to appear at our offices next Monday to address questions about deliberate misrepresentation of intellectual property ownership in federal patent applications. The evidence suggests systematic fraud spanning 15 years and involving hundreds of millions of dollars in licensing revenue. As Marcus stood alone on the stage that was supposed to have been the scene of his greatest triumph, Sarah turned and walked toward the exit. She had finally reclaimed her stolen recognition in the most public way possible, ensuring that everyone who mattered in Silicon Valley now understood that Dr. Sarah Chun was the innovative genius whose work had built everything Marcus had fraudulently claimed as his own achievement. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what had once been Marcus Chen's executive office, illuminating the space that now belonged to its rightful occupant. Dr. Sarah Chun sat behind the mahogany desk that Marcus had commissioned to Project Power and Authority, reviewing legal documents that had fundamentally transformed the landscape of Silicon Valley intellectual property law. 3 weeks had passed since the catastrophic collapse of Marcus's fraudulent empire, and the reverberations continued to reshape the technology industry's understanding of innovation theft and gender bias in patent attribution. The Chun Dynamics Board of Directors had acted with unprecedented speed once the Patent Office investigation confirmed Sarah's ownership of every major technology that had built the company's reputation. Emergency votes had been conducted via secure conference calls as board members rushed to distance themselves from Marcus's systematic fraud while positioning the company to survive the transition to legitimate ownership. The legal implications of having unknowingly profited from stolen intellectual property had terrified investors whose own reputations depended on association with ethical business practices. Sarah opened the morning edition of the Wall Street Journal, reading the front-page article that had established her as Silicon Valley's most remarkable comeback story. The headline read, "Dr. Sarah Chun awarded full control of technology empire built on her stolen innovations." The accompanying photograph showed her standing in front of patent documentation that proved her authorship of breakthrough technologies worth over $500 million in licensing revenue. The article detailed the comprehensive legal settlement that had transferred complete ownership of Chun Dynamics' intellectual property portfolio to Sarah, while leaving Marcus responsible for defending against multiple federal fraud investigations. Patent attorneys across the country were calling it the most significant intellectual property theft case in technology industry history, with implications that would influence how innovation authorship was verified for decades to come. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria Sterling, the Apex Technologies CEO, who had been preparing to partner with Marcus before the revelation destroyed his credibility. Victoria's message was brief, but carried enormous significance for Sarah's future. "Sarah, After reviewing your actual research capabilities, Apex would like to offer you a direct partnership that surpasses anything we considered with Marcus. Your innovations deserve recognition from people who understand their true value. The partnership offer represented complete vindication for Sarah's 15 years of stolen contributions. Apex Technologies was prepared to invest $750 million in licensing agreements that would finally provide her with the resources and recognition that her breakthrough innovations had always deserved. More importantly, the partnership would be structured to ensure that Sarah received full attribution for her work, with contractual protections against any attempt to diminish or erase her contributions. Sarah walked to her window overlooking the San Francisco Bay, remembering the morning 3 weeks earlier when she had sat in this same office listening to Marcus dismiss her as irrelevant to Chin Dynamics' success. The irony was profound. Marcus had unknowingly been correct about one thing. Sarah's departure from active company leadership would indeed benefit everyone involved, but not for the reasons he had imagined. The intercom on her desk buzzed with an announcement from her new assistant, Dr. Jennifer Park, a former MIT colleague who had eagerly accepted the opportunity to work with someone whose technical expertise she had respected for over a decade. Dr. Chun, the CBS 60 Minutes interview team has arrived for your segment about intellectual property theft in the technology industry. Sarah had initially resisted media attention, preferring to focus on reclaiming her research rather than seeking public recognition. However, her patent attorney Rebecca Wong had convinced her that telling her story publicly would help other women whose contributions had been systematically erased by male colleagues who took credit for collaborative work. The 60-minute segment would reach millions of viewers, many of whom worked in industries where gender bias and attribution remained a persistent problem. The interview took place in Sarah's private laboratory, the basement workspace that Marcus had never bothered to explore despite living above it for 15 years. Correspondent Leslie Stahl sat surrounded by servers and development equipment that represented the true birthplace of innovations that had revolutionized artificial intelligence applications. The visual contrast was striking. While Marcus had built his reputation on stolen work presented in corporate boardrooms, Sarah's actual innovations had emerged from this modest space, where she had labored in solitude for over a decade. Stahl's first question addressed the core injustice that had motivated Sarah's decision to expose Marcus's fraud. Dr. Chun, how does it feel to finally receive recognition for innovations that generated hundreds of millions of dollars while your name was completely erased from their development? Sarah's response was measured and thoughtful, reflecting 15 years of careful consideration about how gender bias had shaped her professional experience. Leslie, the most difficult aspect wasn't the financial loss, though that was significant. The devastating part was watching my life's work attributed to someone else, while I was characterized as nothing more than a supportive wife who brought coffee during late-night work sessions. I spent decades developing breakthrough technologies, and my husband reduced my contributions to domestic assistance. The interview continued for over an hour, with Sarah providing detailed explanations of how systematic intellectual property theft had operated within their marriage and business partnership. She described the gradual process through which Marcus had convinced her that his business expertise was essential for translating her innovations into commercial success, while simultaneously erasing her technical contributions from public recognition. Stahl pressed for details about the emotional impact of systematic erasure. You trusted him completely, building innovations together while he was secretly planning to claim everything as his independent work. How do you process that level of betrayal? Sarah paused before responding, her voice carrying the hard-earned wisdom of someone who had survived professional devastation and emerged stronger. The betrayal was profound, but what I've learned is that truth has its own power. Marcus spent 15 years building an empire on my stolen foundations, but he could never actually replicate my work because he never understood the underlying principles. Eventually, reality caught up with his deception. The CBS segment aired 2 weeks later to enormous public response, generating thousands of social media comments from women who had experienced similar erasure of their professional contributions. Sarah received dozens of messages from female researchers, engineers, and innovators who had watched male colleagues receive credit for collaborative work while they remained invisible to public recognition. The most satisfying response came from Dr. Elizabeth Hammond, Sarah's former dissertation advisor at MIT, who published an editorial in the Journal of Artificial Intelligence Research that established the historical record of Sarah's foundational contributions to machine learning development. Hammond's article included documentation proving that Marcus's supposedly breakthrough innovations had actually originated from Sarah's doctoral research, providing academic validation that complemented the legal victories she had already achieved. While Sarah's reputation soared to unprecedented heights, Marcus's professional destruction was equally comprehensive and irreversible. The federal fraud investigation had resulted in criminal charges that would prevent him from holding executive positions at any publicly traded technology company. His personal assets had been frozen pending resolution of civil lawsuits filed by investors who had suffered losses based on his fraudulent claims about intellectual property ownership. The most humiliating aspect of Marcus's downfall was his current employment at a small startup in Oakland, where he worked as a junior business development associate under the supervision of managers who were well aware of his history. His salary was less than what he had previously spent on custom suits, and his office was a shared cubicle in a converted warehouse. The man who had once commanded $100 million investment commitments now struggled to schedule meetings with potential clients who often declined to work with companies that employed someone with his reputation. Marcus's former assistant Jennifer had quickly distanced herself from his collapsing career, accepting a position at Sarah's reorganized company where her MBA skills could be applied to legitimate business development rather than covering up intellectual property fraud. Jennifer had publicly apologized for her unwitting participation in promoting Marcus's false narrative, acknowledging that she should have recognized the implausibility of his claims about developing sophisticated technologies without apparent technical background. 6 months after the revelation that destroyed Marcus's stolen empire, Sarah stood on the stage of the same convention center where he had once delivered his fraudulent keynote presentation. The TechVision Summit had invited her to address the same audience that had previously celebrated Marcus's fabricated achievements, providing a powerful symbol of how truth had ultimately triumphed over systematic deception. Sarah's keynote focused on innovation ethics and the importance of accurate attribution in collaborative research. She spoke to an audience of 5,000 technology professionals about the responsibility that every researcher bears to ensure that their colleagues receive proper recognition for contributed work. Her presentation included specific recommendations for documentation practices that would prevent the kind of systematic theft that she had endured for 15 years. The most meaningful part of her presentation was the announcement of the Chun Institute for Innovation Ethics, a foundation that Sarah had established to support women whose contributions to technology development had been systematically erased or minimized. The institute would provide legal assistance, research funding, and public recognition for female innovators who had struggled to receive appropriate credit for breakthrough work. During the question period, a young woman raised her hand with an inquiry that resonated throughout the auditorium. Dr. Chun, what advice would you give to women who are currently experiencing what you went through, watching their innovations attributed to male colleagues who are building careers on stolen work? Sarah's response was direct and empowering. Document everything. Trust your instincts when you sense that your contributions are being minimized or erased. Build relationships with colleagues who can verify your work independently. And most importantly, never accept someone else's definition of your value or your contributions. The truth has power, but only if you're willing to fight for it. As the applause subsided and the conference concluded, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from invisible assistant to recognized innovator. The cost had been enormous, involving the destruction of a marriage and the public humiliation of someone she had once loved. However, the alternative would have been watching Marcus continue profiting from her stolen work while she remained erased from the history of innovations that could reshape entire industries. The final scene of Sarah's triumph occurred 3 months later at the MIT graduation ceremony, where she delivered the commencement address to engineering students who represented the next generation of technology innovators. Standing at the podium where she had once defended her doctoral thesis, Sarah spoke to graduates who would soon enter industries where gender bias and attribution theft remained persistent challenges. Her concluding remarks emphasized the responsibility that every innovator bears to protect the integrity of collaborative work. Sometimes the most important innovation isn't a new algorithm or breakthrough technology. Sometimes it's simply ensuring that credit goes where credit is due, that recognition reaches the people who actually created the work, and that truth ultimately prevails over convenient fiction. As Sarah left the MIT campus where her journey had begun over 2 decades earlier, she carried with her the satisfaction of having reclaimed not just her stolen innovations, but her rightful place in the history of technological progress. The woman who had been dismissed as irrelevant had proven that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting the truth speak for itself. The story of Dr. Sarah Chen's fight for recognition had become a catalyst for broader changes in how the technology industry approached attribution and collaboration. Her victory had demonstrated that systematic intellectual property theft could be exposed and punished, providing hope for countless other innovators whose contributions had been similarly erased. Marcus Chen's name had been permanently removed from the patents that built his former empire, replaced by the signature of the woman whose genius had made his stolen success possible. Justice, it turned out, had been worth the wait. What resonated most with you about Sarah's journey from invisible partner to recognized innovator? Have you ever experienced situations where your contributions were minimized or overlooked? Share your thoughts about how we can better ensure that credit goes where it truly belongs.